6:18, approaching 6:19 in Trinidad and Tobago. Good to have you with us on this Thursday, and we have a very serious issue that we want to discuss this morning, because it was reported just last evening the Democratic National Convention in the United States, because you know they have in their fun now as they lead up to their general election in November. They were reporting that human trafficking is the third largest criminal enterprise in the world, and more efforts need to be put in place to completely eradicate this problem. Can it ever really be completely eradicated? Can it be restricted significantly to reduce the impact in a very meaningful way? Well, that's some of the issues we want to address this morning. Some may not be aware, but such crimes do exist in Trinidad and Tobago, resulting in the creation of the Counter-Trafficking Unit. And we have two representatives of the unit here with us, Alana Wheeler, Director of the CTU, and Jerome Ramdullah, an authorized officer. And I had to give him the peacock as to what is there an unauthorized officer running around somewhere doing the work. But again, apparently the legislation, the law stipulates authorized officer, and as I explained to them very quickly, as far as I know, the law is an ass, but they will deal with that part of it. But we're talking about things seriously. By the way, you can also find out more information about the unit. They are on Facebook at Counter-Trafficking Unit TT. They're on Twitter at CTU_MNSTT, and they're also on YouTube at Counter-Trafficking Unit TT. So let's get some detail, Alana Wheeler. When we're talking about human trafficking, the situation in Trinidad and Tobago, do we have a major problem in this country?
Well, yes, I would say good morning, to Fazeer, and good morning to our viewers and our listeners and those on the web. Yes, human trafficking is a problem in every country. What has happened, I would say, since about 2003 is that the UN has sort of made it a mandate that countries establish their own legislation to criminalize the offense. In the past, it was not criminalized. So what you found, for example, in Trinidad and in the Caribbean is that persons who were victims of sexual exploitation were treated as prostitutes, and they were therefore brought before the courts and charged. Right? So now that it's a criminal offense in TNT for the past 3 years, we've been able to charge persons. And so far, we've charged 22 persons for human trafficking.
Is that, based on the available resources and so on, is that a lot? Is that a little bit? What is your own feeling about the situation?
I think definitely we can do more. You know, we can do more, but the crime is based heavily on the victims coming forward and on witnesses coming forward. And, you know, there are several reasons why you wouldn't have witnesses or victims coming forward because of the nature of the crime. It is a crime that is committed on the DL. Right? Hidden in plain sight is another phrase, right? So what you find is, for example, in houses or homes of disrepute, you'd have to prove that commercial sex is taking place there. And the only way you can prove that is either through a sting operation or through somebody coming forward and saying, look, I was paid to have sex with this person. You know, and so we understand with trafficking, there is that whole measure of psychological control that the traffickers have on the victim. There is the whole issue of intimidation and fear, right, that traffickers try to use to control their victims. So sometimes it's referred to as modern-day slavery. And the reason for that is that in the days of slavery, the bondage was the chains and the shackles, right? In today's, if you want to say slavery, it's the psychological shackles and the emotional shackles that the traffickers have on the victims.
Of course, we want to get to the point where we'll discuss and at least advise myself and others and our viewing and listening audience as to what they should be looking for. What are the signs that should tell them, look, you know, I probably need to report this or something like that. But as we come up towards the United Nations Day on Saturday, marking the entire awareness about human trafficking, where would you place Trinidad and Tobago as far as this whole process of observance, and observance not just for the sake of observing a day, but saying that we are being very proactive in this particular issue of fighting this matter of human trafficking?
Yeah, well, I would say as a country we have been proactive. In fact, just the establishment of the unit is one measure that we've put in place. We've also charged persons, including law enforcement officers. They have been charged. From the UN World Day began 2 years ago, and that was in 2014. And from the year that it began, we recognized it. We actually convened the National Task Force on that day, And since then, we have been doing small activities really to commemorate the day. So for this year, what we're doing is there's going to be a media release in the newspapers, all three. We have the minister who's going to be interviewed on radio, and we are doing some interviews on television and on radio. And at the library in Nales, in Port of Spain, we are going to be having a puppet show for children at 11 o'clock on Saturday morning.
So that's going to be at Nales on 11 o'clock on Saturday?
Yes, so all children are invited to come. It's free.
So and clearly the message is going to be sent, especially to children who can be the most vulnerable in this regard. Right. Jerome Ramdullah, just give us your perspective on this entire issue of human trafficking, because in a place like Trinidad and Tobago, as I suppose with any other country, there's wild speculation. I don't know if you recall the situation a couple of years ago, where all of a sudden there was this talk about children in a container somewhere on the port, and then the place went wild with rumors and so on. Give us your perspective from your role as an authorized officer in the department.
Well, what I recognize is that we traditionally link sex or prostitution as some form of exploitation. We've been having that, but usually when we investigate matters, it's not really that. So it's sometimes the callers or the public that we get information from might take things a little out of control, that's not really. So we need to inform the public more of the indicators, so it'll be on our field. Yeah.
And when we talk about dealing with the issue, as in your role as an officer, what is your function? Are you required to go out in the field to investigate reports?
Well, as an authorized officer, is that we help with the day-to-day functions of everything with the counter-trafficking unit, and that also includes investigating and protecting victims of human trafficking. So yes, we do go on the field, we investigate all matters pertinent to human trafficking, covered under the Trafficking in Persons Act.
Are there so many cases that you all are overburdened? Do you need more? Do you feel that you need more resources, more personnel, or maybe Alana Wheeler, you can handle that one to deal with something like this?
Yeah, that's a good. It's good to raise that challenge. I don't know if you'd ever have enough resources to deal with human trafficking, but what I can say is we have been maximizing the use of the resources that we have. We have had a lot of reports coming in since we launched our hotline last year. For this year alone, we've had almost 60 reports coming in for the year, and though we have a small group of officers and a small team, we are working with the best of the resources that we have.
And by the way, that hotline is 800-4CTU, that's 800-4288. And let's talk about what citizens should be looking for. If you see something, what suspicious activities are you looking for, either from your neighbor or someone you know, or some business place, or whatever else? What should you be looking for?
Okay, well, what I want to talk about first is the vulnerabilities and what makes someone vulnerable.
Yeah.
Right? Because the UNWDATIP this year, that's the focus for the year, that they want to sort of educate the public on what can make someone vulnerable. When you have a foreign national coming in and they speak another language and they don't speak your language, they're in an unfamiliar environment. When they don't have their relatives or friends or family around or their usual network, they have basically been isolated. So what you would be looking for is persons who are isolated. And how are they isolated? You find that they keep to themselves in an apartment or in a house. And what we have found is the traffickers have moved away from going to brothels and having the girls at the brothels that we know of. And they are renting these upscale apartments and upscale houses where you don't have that measure of surveillance, if you want to see. Right? And they have them staying in these places, and they take them out to different establishments to service clients, or they take them to hotels to service clients. So if you find that you have foreign nationals living in an apartment or house, they keep to themselves, they don't really come outside, they are picked up at odd hours of the night, there are strange vehicles pulling up in front of the house or the apartment, and they don't really interact with the neighbors, then that's a red flag. Right? If you go in an establishment, let's say a grocery or a restaurant or even a hotel, and you find that there are a lot of foreigners working in that establishment and they don't speak our language, that is also a red flag, because those are persons who can be vulnerable and fall prey to trafficking, right? What you find is that in the labor, with forced labor or even domestic servitude, they would hire them and pay them below minimum wages and have them living in very adverse conditions. And really, who can they call out to for help? Because they don't know anyone, they don't speak the language, and they don't have a network of persons that they can trust. So those are some indicators that we can look for. With children, what we have found, we've gone out to the primary schools and high schools over the past couple months, and we have been having meetings with school supervisors, parent-teachers association, and we found that it is also a problem in the schools with respect to child pornography. And when you look at our legislation, child pornography is a form of child trafficking, right? And we find the young people are using their cell phones and their tablets to take pictures, to take videos of themselves masturbating with each other, masturbating, having sex with each other, and then one teenager might use it to blackmail another teenager, right? Or an adult may be the one facilitating it, and then he is selling it to his friends. You know, and we know in the news a couple of months or weeks ago there was this issue of pornography ending up,
yes,
right? So you find people can tap into your Facebook page. So you exchange a nude photo or some conversation with you and your boyfriend, and your boyfriend, you break up with the person, and the person decides to get back at you by posting your stuff on these websites where they buy your information. So with children, and when we say children, those under 18 years, that is a form of child trafficking.
Is the legislation struggling to keep up with all that is happening?
Actually, I would say no. Our legislation is actually based on the UN protocol, the Palermo Protocol, and it covers all types of human trafficking. We also cover areas to protect and to assist victims of trafficking, and most of the countries that have domestic legislation have covered the 4 Ps, we call it: prevention, protection, prosecution, and partnerships. So our legislation is open to all the different types. The penalty for child trafficking is $1 million or up to 20 years imprisonment, and for the adults is $500,000 or up to 20 years imprisonment, 15 years, right? If there is a law enforcement officer who is found guilty, that is up to 25 years imprisonment.
And Mr. Ramdullah, do you find that people are willing to come forward with information? Because sometimes we have a culture, well, let me get involved, because I could, next thing you know, I end up in court as a witness and I get threatened and all sorts of things, because there are all sorts of issues tied into someone saying, well, look, this looks suspicious. Should I report it? Should I not report it? Do I want to get involved in these issues? Do you find people willing to come forward with information?
So far, people have been responding, especially to the hotline. People are coming forward and providing information. This is due to the sensitizations and awareness programs from the counter-trafficking unit. In fact, most recently, because of our sensitization with police officers, we found that police officers themselves are now observing things, the indicators, and are also coming forward and reporting cases to us.
And just give me a sense as to what happens. Let's say someone calls on the hotline to report something that they find suspicious just going on next door, across the road, or somewhere else. What is the process that follows?
Well, based on the information received, because sometimes callers can be sometimes vague. So let's look at a scenario where we get as much information as possible. We'll look at the situation, we'll examine it, we'll see how, we'll do some surveillance and take a look at it, and from all our resources available, we'll see what information we can capture and then proceed accordingly.
Do you find that sometimes again, because of the whole issue of resources, and as Ms. Wheeler said, you can never have enough resources in dealing with it, that sometimes you find people are being more mischievous, giving misleading information because they just want to cause difficulty for someone else, and that sort of situation?
Well, we've had instances where we had prank calls. We'd have instances where we had mischievous calls. But when I compare all the calls that we've got, that's kind of in the minority. Most calls we've found so far has been good intelligence. And
Mr. You made that point about people who are foreign nationals, who may not speak English as a first language, or may not speak English at all, for that matter. Is it not a stigmatization to automatically throw up a red flag if you go into a grocery and nobody speaks English comfortably? It might just be that they just work as a family business, and they all may be foreign nationals, and there's nothing illegal with it.
Yeah, I would say it's a red flag. I would say it's a red flag because you have the whole issue of work permits also. And what you find is immigration. We work very closely with immigration, in fact, and you would find that there may be labor violations in that instance, right? If labor inspectorate were to go in, or if immigration were to go in and check the work permits, you might be surprised at some things you might find.
We have a couple of minutes left, Mr. And what message would you like to leave with the public this one? I know it's a real PR exercise over the next few days and during the course of this week to heighten the levels of awareness and sensitivity of the public. Well, what's the message you want to leave with the audience?
What I'd want to say to the audience is really to be alert, be on the lookout, look beneath the surface, and call our hotline 800-4288 if you suspect any suspicious activity taking place. And
Mr. Ramdullah, in that sense, because sometimes people ask themselves the question as to whether or not, when they get involved, when they report, but will justice be done? Are you satisfied that the process that you are involved in, that you are part of, in fighting this issue of counter-trafficking, that the system is working, that is working effectively from your point of view?
I think what's really important is that rescuing victims. That is one of the most fundamental things with a victim-centered approach. We have to rescue people who are in a position of slavery, modern-day slavery. After we do our investigations, up to another process, the judiciary process, so it's one step at a time. But to me, one of the most rewarding things, we had an exercise where we did rescue 2 victims. So that's a real important factor, and that's important, rescuing people.
It must feel like a real achievement when you rescue someone from a particularly desperate situation, whatever that may be, whether it be the sex workers or virtual slave labor or child trafficking, but thanks very much for coming in this morning to give us an update on this, because it is something that often goes unreported and doesn't get the sort of attention that it deserves. But again, that hotline, if you are mindful of something that is going on that seems a bit odd in your area, whether in a business environment or a domestic environment that seems a little strange, call 800-4CTU. That's 800-4CTU. That's 800-4288 to provide the necessary information. And there are a number of email addresses as well. Stop Trafficking Today at mns.gov.tt and countertraffickingunit@gmail.com. And we've given you some of the other contact information already. So it shouldn't be a case of turning a blind eye. It's just a matter of if you really are conscious about something that's going on very suspiciously, report it, and you have all the contact information. Coming up towards 6:35 in Trinidad and Tobago, we'll take a break and move on to another interview segment right after this.